everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from December 31st, 2022, and I'm recording this on June 30th, 2023. As always, I give you those dates so you know when this information is actually relevant because, as you will see as we go through these books, the market is always moving and changing. So yeah, 6 months from now, this might not be an accurate description of what's really happened with these particular books. As always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. Each week they put out lists of books that are hot or trending in the market, that are got a bunch of sales going on. The CBSI list is their hot top 10. It's on their website. Tom works with key collectors, trending list of 20 books, and he selects 10 that he then puts in his video. So those are the books that we're going to be talking about this week, all weeks. We talk about the books that are on those lists. And really, we use those lists just to give us a guide of what was moving in the market, what were people chasing, what were people paying a premium for. And we use this look back to see, okay, what happened since? How can we be smarter about which books we buy in the moment? It shouldn't come as any big surprise that in general, being patient pays off. If a book's being talked about and got a lot of buzz, then usually it's going to be more sales than when it's not. But let's dig into this list and see what we can learn this week. First up, we got The Keep, number 1 from 2005, and this book was optioned. So of course, people were chasing it, paying $30+ for it raw. And now it's a $6 book, and that's based on one sale of a single issue. There's a couple sales for like 10, 15 of like multiple issues of The Keep that included number 1. But yeah, so $6, one sale, that's a dumpster fire. This is not a surprise. If you've been watching this list at all for any period of time, buying things when option news happens is a terrible idea. You should always be more patient. Next, we have Game of Thrones number ? And supposedly this is because George was actually working on the final books. We'll see if at this point, if anybody thinks we're actually ever going to see the final 2 books, they're crazy, but we might get Winds of Winter. I doubt we ever get A Promise of Spring or whatever it's called now. But anyway, that was causing multiple A covers of the series, of the comic series of Game of Thrones, to hit the list or sell for all-time highs, particularly at 9.8s. There was multiple 9.8s of non-issue number 1 going for 125+. I didn't look up them all. I just looked at number 2. Right now, number 2, which is like the first Tyrion, still only had 2 sales, no 9.8 sales. $3 for a raw copy, $40 for a 9.8, or $40 for $3 for one raw copy, $40 for another raw copy, and there were several prices in between that weren't selling. That 40 seemed a little bit crazy, so we're calling this down in a trap. It looked like sales were down all across the board for these. I just used specifically number 2 for an example, but this is not. That's very typical of what's going on with all of these. The only really 9.8 sales were all for like number 1, or there was a couple signed higher issues that had sold in a 9.8. Next, we have Amazing Spider-Man number 1. We're moving into covers. So this is the M&M variant. It originally hit the list a month or so ago. I think it hit twice, along with then also the variant, the black and white variant of this that hit the list. Back then, this book was going for $150, $250, which is not that much different than it was going for when we talked about it a month or so ago. But by then, a 9.8 had started to return, and a 9.8 sold for $1,700+. And these were not signed 9.8s; they were just 9.8s. Yeah, those early 9.8s were going crazy. Raw copies now are still $175, $250, so right in the same range. You could say very steady, kind of worth it on the raw side. But 9.8s now are going for $450 to $500. That's a dumpster fire if you try to pay $1,700 for a 9.8. Just to try to get one quickly, yeah, it's nowhere near that valuable right now. Our next cover is Harley Quinn number 25, the Jenny Frison 1 in 25. This was kind of the start of her variant run on Harley, which I still need to go back and get. I've been getting all the regular variants that started with 26, but I still need to get this one. And unfortunately, this one hasn't really come down. Back then, it was $40 to $50, which is only slightly less than double ratio, which usually means that book is going to end up around ratio. This book is bucking that trend. It is now a $35 to $100 book, but sales kind of scattered throughout that range. Interestingly enough, though, 9.8 only went for $125. So yeah, those higher end raw sales are probably not realistic because you're not gonna get that much for a 9.8. So some people are overpaying there. But we gotta call it steady and worth it. You could argue maybe even steady. I mean, you could argue maybe up, but there's not enough sales toward the higher end to make me think that. It's more, most of the sales are still 35 to 60-ish, with just a couple sales on that higher end toward 100. But yeah, if you're paying 100, it's probably too much for this one even now. But next, we have Blue Beetle, Graduation Day #2, the Adrian Gutierrez 1 in 25, and this is the first appearance of the Yellow Beetle, I guess. And the Yellow Beetle is, I guess, this character on this 1 in 25 cover. That's why this was going for something. But this 1 in 25 back then was only going for 25 to 35, so just barely above ratio, which is never a good sign, first appearance or not. Raw copies now are 17 to 30, so right in the same range. So it stayed steady instead of dropping down to like a $10 book, which typically a 1 in 25 going for ratio would do. 9.8, 200, which is a little high for $15 to $30 book, but not crazy. So overall, we're going to call this steady. I'll be back. You can do a little better than back then, but it's definitely through that same kind of range. Next, our last cover, so we didn't have very many covers this week, is Death of Superman, and the 30th anniversary special, #1, the second print, Dan Jurgens 1 in 25. So this is very interesting. Back then, raw sales were going for 60 plus, so 1 in 25 going for slightly over double usually means that book's going to end up between ratio and double. Usually it's got to get to triple to really take off. And there's only been one sale recently in the last couple months of this book that I could find on eBay. It was a 9.8, went for $1,300. There's no listings right now. This is the only sale I could find, so I don't know if this book has just become a ghost or what. But we have to call it up in straight cash for a $1,300 9.8 sale. But I would tread lightly with this book. I find it hard to believe it's that rare that it really is worth this kind of money. When you have one sale, I wouldn't allow that one sale to dictate how I bought the book. I'm sure sellers are going to try to use that to dictate what they price the book at. I would not be paying that kind of crazy price for this. I can't imagine it's that rare. But that is the data I have to go off of. So we're going to call it up in straight cash, but I'd put big quotation marks around that. I find this a little bit hard to believe that this book is really worth this, but so far that one sale says it is. Next, we're going to move into Comic Buzz. And our first Comic Buzz book of the week is Burning Man #1. And this was another bad idea book that had some buzz because I think you got, instead of having tokens or however they do this, you were getting something extra with this book or whatever. So people were chasing this. $20 to $30 back then because of the gimmick around how it was being released. And now it's a $2 to $15 book. 9.8, $45 to $50. That's a dumpster fire. Shockingly, a bad idea book's a dumpster fire, which is the case with every bad idea book that's hit this list. But people keep chasing them when they first come out, and you should not. You should just be patient because they will become affordable. And that's really, 99% of the bad idea books that people have chased have not panned out. Next, we have Darkwing Duck #1, and this is the buzz because we're getting a new comic series, as that was the reports. I don't know if we're getting it yet or not. I haven't really been paying attention, but it costs 9.8 to jump up to $360 on a first appearance of Darkwing Duck. Now raw copies are 20 to 70 with 9.8s. The sales all $340, $350, so slightly down, but that's close enough. You're talking $10, $20 on around $350. I think that's a steady and I'll be back. Maybe you can do a little better. It'd be worth being patient, but it's really right there in the same price range that it was back then. So yeah, a lot of love for this, a lot of nostalgia for this book for sure. Next, we have Peter Parker, Miles Morales, Double Trouble, #2. This is the first appearance of a female version of Mysterio. Back then was causing this to hit the list. Raw copies were going for $10 to $12. So double, not quite triple ratio, or triple cover price ratio, triple cover price back then. Now it's a cover price to $10 book. It's basically no real buzz with this character. We'll see. I don't think this character showed up in anything other than this Double Trouble book or Double Trouble series since then. So yeah, this is definitely a down, and I'll be back because there was no real reason to chase it back then, and you can get it for basically cover plus shipping at this point. Next, we have Hulk number 6, the first appearance of Titan, which is, I guess, the Hulk's Hulk is how this has been described to me. I haven't been reading this Hulk run, so I don't fully understand, but if the Hulk turns into a Hulk, I guess, is what they're talking about. I don't know, it seems kind of weird, but anyway. Back then, raw copies were still only going for $4. 9.8 was going for $50, and this has really had everything to do with the fact that the Kate's run was coming to an end, and Titan was playing a role in that. But it really wasn't going for any kind of real value. Now it's still a cover price, the $6 book, so you could maybe argue it's, slightly more valuable. 9.8 is $40 to $50, still barely above what it costs to even get it slabbed nowadays and shipped to and from. So yeah, we're going to call this a steady, and I'll be back because there was no reason to chase it back then. You can still get it for cover price, but it hasn't really moved or changed either in value, so that's why it still gets a steady. Next, we have Amazing Spider-Man number 14, the first appearance of Hallows' Eve. This was a new character that had a bunch of buzz, and since we knew she was getting her own series, by this point we knew she was getting her own series, so that's why people were chasing her first appearance. There are a ton of covers for this, and I think a few of those covers actually do have some value, but this book, this A cover, was only going for $4 back then. 9.8 was going for $70. Now it's a $2 to $6 book. 9.8, one sale, going for $80. So we're going to call this another steady, and I'll be back. You can do just as well, if not better, if you've just been patient. It really wasn't going for much back then, not going for much now. I guess if you really want to invest in Hallows' Eve, you probably need to look for a couple, whatever the hot variant is, and I'll profess I don't know which is the hot one that really actually has value. Next, we're still on Buzz, and we're going with DC Comics Presents number 26, first appearance of Raven, Starfire, and Cyborg, kicking off the new Teen Titans run by Perez and Wolfman. So yeah, back then, this was hitting the list because the Dark Crisis event was coming to an end, and it was setting up what we're getting now, which is the Titans are the main team in the DC universe, and the Justice League is currently disbanded. So yeah, this group is all leading the new premier team in the DC universe at the moment. So that was all being set up back then. That's why this book was hitting the list. Now, this was one I didn't do, as you've noticed. This was a week I did not do Cash or Trash. So this is one of those where Tom had the average at $430 for this book. That seemed crazy to me. And yeah, as I look now, the average raw sales are $50 to $200 on this book. Is basically what you're looking at to get a raw copy. Really nice ones are around $200. Yeah, so that's what you're looking at on a raw side. So I don't know where the average of $430 came from. But 9.8s are actually up. Back then it said 9.8 $1,000. Now 9.8s are $1,300 to $1,500 pretty consistently. So yeah, up, worth it. You could argue up straight cash, but probably, I guess I did write down worth it. I probably should have wrote down straight cash, but anyway, definitely up on this one on the 9.8 side. Raw copies look like they're down compared to the average, but this is one of those averages from Tom and them in Key Collector that you just can't trust because it doesn't make any sense with any of the data unless you're including 9.8s with raws, and that just doesn't work for an average. Average is not the number you want to use for that. Next, we have New Teen Titans number 2, the first appearance of Deathstroke. This was also because of the Dark Crisis event, and this is because he was kind of the main villain, or being used by the main villain. Him and Nightwing's showdown was kind of the main part of the end of this run. Back then, averages, again, wouldn't trust these averages, $350 according to Tom, 9.8, $925. Now, raw copies are $70 to $140 on this one, 9.8, $800 to $1,000 in recent sales. So this is still priced right in the same range on the 9.8 side. I doubt it's dropped that much on the raw side. This is probably a bad average again. But so we're going to look at the 9.8s and call this steady and worth it based on that data. I will say there was also a recent 9.8 sale for $225 on this one that, like, literally this week, that you're going to be like, what? That seems something odd was going on there is all I can say. Somebody didn't know what it was worth, listed it for that, or just needed to move it, and it sold super quick. But that sale is out there and that data point is out there, but I would be very much surprised if you can find that anytime soon again. All right, next, moving out of comic buzz, and we got one Star Wars book this week, and that is Star Wars Kanan the Last Padawan, number 6, the first full appearance of Sabine, Ezra, and Hera, as well as Zeb and Chopper, I think. And this was basically, we got news about the Ahsoka show again, that confirming that all of these characters were going to appear, or at least the Sabine, Ezra, and Hera characters were all going to appear in the Ahsoka show. So that's what caused this book to re-hit the list. This book had been super high at one point. This is another one I have my doubts about the average they gave, which was 135, but I won't question that quite as hard. But right now, raw copies are 40 to 150, so over that same kind of range that they said back then, even if the average of that would be lower. 9.8 is 325. Right now, 9.8s are 3 to 400. We're, a month plus from this starting? I think it kicks off in August as the launch date for Ahsoka. So, yeah, that's why this book is still doing pretty well. It's been steady and worth it. If this is a book you want, I would probably wait till about 6 months from now after the show is come and gone. And then that's when I would be looking for this book, probably. Next, we have Amazing Spider-Man number 78. The first appearance of Hobie Brown, in this case as Prowler. And this was hitting the list because kind of in the aftermath of the Spider-Verse trailer, we've gotten across the Spider-Verse now. That's been a month or so ago now, a little more. And yeah, we knew we were getting Spider-Punk. We got confirmation we were getting Spider-Punk, which is an alternate version of Hobie Brown, but that was causing this book to hit the list. Another average that I don't trust, average of 550, according to Tom, with 9.8 going for 5,800. Now, raw copies are 60 to 200. So that's one of those where, you definitely, so again, it would appear the raws are cheaper, but maybe not that much. 9.8 sale for 5,000, so that's definitely down. But I'm putting this as steady, and I'll be back because even with the 9.8 sale down, because it's only really one 9.8 sale that's been down. There hasn't been a lot of other sales. The book had kind of bumped around the movie. So overall, probably fairly steady over the 6 months in terms of what this is going to cost you. I would say going forward from here, this book may back up a little bit or significantly, that you can do a little better on this book as we get further and further away from the movie. I know the rumors have already started that Beyond is not going to come out on time, but we will see if we get Beyond the Spider-Verse next year or not. Next, we got 3 MCU books, and first up we have Iron Man Submariner number 1. This was the launch of each of basically this was a one-shot that launched each of their solo titles in the Silver Age. I put this under MCU back then, but I didn't write down what was going on. I guess it was just rumors that Tony Stark was going to be back, and there were rumors that obviously they were going to continue to use Subby because he showed up in Black Panther, so that's where I think this was coming from. But I think it was mostly the rumors that RDJ was going to come back as Iron Man in some form or another is what was causing this book to hit the list. But yeah, a little odd there for sure why this particular book. But anyway, back then, another average that makes no sense, averages of $800 on this one. 9.6 sale went for $3,800. Now raw copies of this are 50 to 250, so I would say, yeah, that's pretty reasonable. There was a really high grade copy that went for $750 on the raw side, so but still lower than the average back then. 9.8 sale though, most recent 9.8 sale, right at $3,800, right in line with what it was going for back then, and you could see that across some other grades as well. 9.6. I wrote down 9. Yeah. Most recent 9.6 sale matched the 9.6 sale from back then. Sorry. Of $3,800. So we're going to call this steady and worth it. We're going to say this one stayed in there, even though that average would indicate dumpster fire. That's probably not what was going on. Next, we have Fantastic Four number 244. First appearance of Frankie Ray as Nova, or she becomes Nova, a Herald of Galactus in this book. And this hit the list because there was more confirmation that Nova is going to be coming to the MCU. Only, I don't think it's this version of Nova. We'll talk about the version that it's probably going to be, or closer it's going to be next. But for some reason people were chasing this book. This is one of those where Marvel used the same name for two very different characters. So it's not like the later versions of Nova. This is just a completely different character. Back then, raw copies were going for 30 to 60, 9.8, 280. Now raw copies are 5 to 45. 9.8, the most recent 9.8 sale was still 300. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily trust that. If the vast majority of sales are on the raw side, and they are definitely a trap compared to what they were back then. So just a reminder, this Nova is not related to the Nova Core in any way, shape, or form. So next we have Nova #1, the first appearance of Nova Richard Rider, the original Nova, at least in Marvel Comics. And yeah, so this was hitting the list. This makes more sense for Nova rumors in the MCU. Back then, raw copies were up to 160, 9.8 back up to 1,700, both of which were still down from some of those 2020 and 2021 peaks related to this book, which is not a surprise. That's really the case with almost any book you talk about. But now this is a $20 to $200 book raw, so which makes about right. Again, his average for 160 raw is probably a little high. 9.8, 11 to 1,600, so down just a little bit from that 1,700 back then. So we're gonna call this a down, and it'll all be back. Not dramatically down, but definitely, you can definitely do a little bit better right now than you could then. So that's this week's list. We had a pretty good distribution of Buzz and covers and MCU and Sony Spiders and option news. So I want to thank you guys for watching. Hope you learned something, and we will catch you next time.